Thank you all for coming. This is really great to see the confluence of my Maxwell worlds and Newhouse worlds. What up, Econ? That's great. Good, good. All right. So actually, I'm gonna talk to you about a couple of things today. But really, at the center of it all is this idea of perspective. Nelson Mandela said, "Where you stand depends on where you sit." And what I'd really like to talk about today is the stories that we tell ourselves, the stories that we tell each other. Is it possible for me to have a version of the truth different from your version of the truth? What is the truth, and do our differences discount us telling that story? So I'm going to start by showing you a tree. And please forgive this video. The first couple things I'm showing you are just outtake little things, but I think this illustrates well my point. This was shot from a car in Northern Uganda approaching the town of Gulu, which is where we shot our film that you're about to see. So it's not only thematically relevant, but it's geographically relevant to where we're going. And if we can see it. There's no sound. But as you see, we're approaching this giant, beautiful tree in the outskirts of Gulu. But wait, it has a surprise. Lo and behold, it's actually two trees. And receding into the distance, you realize, no, it's actually only just the one tree. So, I think this video sums it up quite well. The idea that from a distance, my goal in getting to Northern Uganda was to tell a really simple story. One of water scarcity for a nonprofit, the Clearwater Initiative. And what I found was so much more. It was so much more complex and deeper than we had understood going into it. So instead of introducing the levels of complexity, I'm going to allow a local to tell you, to kind of set the scene for what was happening at the time that we shot this video. This man is now the president of the Democratic Party in Uganda. His name is Norbert Mao. He was chairman of Gulu district at the time. And so he was speaking to what was going on in the area where we filmed. So this is just a quick 3-minute introduction before our film. What I'd like you to do is please keep either mental notes or a quick jotted list of the issues that he identifies, okay? Because they're gonna cue into our making of the film. My first trip to Uganda was in 2007, which was just months after the ceasefire between the LRA and the government. The LRA is a group fronted by a man named Joseph Kony, who some of you may have heard of. He, at the time of my visit, was in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And his last whereabouts were in the Central African Republic, still at large. So just keep in mind that list as you watch the film, and tell me if you think we've identified the issues that you would have identified. Okay? With that, let's watch the film. So that's our film. Lillian is quite an individual. She has been through things that most of us wouldn't want to speak of, but has persevered. She's She's a really strong, strong woman. A lot of respect for her. So I'm going to speak for a few more minutes and then open this up to questions. I really want this to be an interactive experience for you guys. So I'd like to start off coming back to our list. I want to think about that list of issues that we identified. So let's just start calling some things out. What are some of the issues that you heard Norbert Mao list as important to his district?
Education.
Education. What else?
Peace.
Peace.
Lack of resources.
Lack of resources.
No homes or roads.
No roads or homes. Okay.
Walking miles to get to health facilities.
Okay, health facilities. Couple more.
Water.
Water. Yes.
Human rights.
Human rights.
Infrastructure problems.
Infrastructure, yes. Anything else? Okay. So, yes.
No facilities in camp.
Yeah, well, we'll just say the camps themselves. The fact that people are living in IDP camps is an issue, right? We don't want them there to begin with. And as we're transitioning into peace, post-conflict reconstruction involves addressing all of these things in a place that they don't currently exist and they haven't for years and years. So already just from this list, you can see how my focus was minuscule compared to the other issues. But it was important, okay? So the list that I came up with was pretty similar to yours. The war, the child soldiers, the IDP camps, the need for reconciliation, and land issues. That's a big part of Lillian's story, and continuing to this day, Professor Ron Atkinson, who you saw interviewed, he's actually making a trip to Acholi this week to address land issues there, and he's civically engaged with trying to rectify some of that. So my focus on water seemed to fall short. So let's talk about your reaction to the film. What was your emotional response? You can start calling them out. Upsetting. It could be an emotion or a question that the film left you with, a feeling, a thought.
Helplessness.
Helpless. Okay.
Feeling more responsible to the world. Feeling more responsible to the world issues.
To the which issues?
World issues.
Yes, the world issues. Okay. So you felt connected to them. Okay, great. Great.
Weak government, probably.
A weak government. Government.
Government.
Yes?
Yes.
Anything else? Tosca.
Gender injustice.
Gender injustice.
I felt afraid of becoming a refugee like her.
Fear. Okay.
Is there something that I can do?
Okay. Anything else?
Compassion.
Okay.
And competition.
Competition. Tell me about that.
Well, specifically with respect to Lillian, everybody's fighting for their own little piece of pie and for survival. So, on some levels, I would expect people to come together to help each other. But also, I got the feeling from the video that people aren't as willing. So.
It's true. Yeah, in fact, did you all hear his question? He was talking about land issues and the idea of competitiveness, that in this environment he would have expected collaboration and community, and instead what we found was competition. And indeed, Lillian was pushed off of her land by some neighbors who stole her land from her. It was her family land for years and years and years, but there's no records, there's no way to prove these things. Okay? So, thank you for that list. And the reason I want to do this exercise, I'm trying to bring you guys into the filmmaking process today. I'm not here to hold up this film as necessarily a success or a failure. I'll let you decide that on your own. But I did want to clue you into the issues that we all face as people that are civically engaged, as people that are trying to affect policy, people that are trying to affect the hearts and minds, people that are trying to sway our donors. How do we get into that process? And how do we begin to identify what the story is? Is it the right story? Is it the right time for that story? For me, I think we've got some good things on this list. The fact that we have compassion, certainly a success. Wondering what I can do, certainly a success. That's what we want people to do. I think one of the great failures of this film is that I did not give people enough action items on what they could do with this feeling of being upset and helpless. So I think that's a big failure of this film. And some of these, these other emotions, you walk away from this film thinking, I don't really know what to do with this. So I think an important component as we're telling stories and trying to engage our audiences is giving them an outlet for that action. Make sure that they know where you're directing them as you're doing this. So based on our list, what do you think? Did the film address the issues that were raised? Did it address them appropriately? Were they the right issues? Feel free to attack it. You guys are not gonna, you are not gonna hurt my feelings. You are not gonna hurt my feelings.
We all still have those emotions of this movie.
I mean, it seems like you covered most of the things on the list.
Yeah. I think that's actually one of the failings of the film, is that it covered too much. I tried to cover too much. And the reason I did that, if we look back at our first list, we have all these things, right? I was there, remember, for a water nonprofit, okay? So my board members expected this story. That's it. I brought back this. They're like, what do we do with this? But I felt an obligation to bring in the depth and the complexity. And really, my goal in this film was to help our donors have a better understanding of who we're helping, why we're helping them. What part does water play in this? Well, if you look at all these other issues, in my thinking, how easy is this one to knock out? Let's throw a couple grand and put a hole in the ground and let water not be an issue, because they got enough other stuff going on. So that's what I wanted to address. Herman.
I think, though, if you just focused on water, my opinion, of course, I don't know if the film would have been, the film kind of grabs you, if you will. It keeps your attention. If you just focused on water, I don't know if it would have done that. And I also feel that by focusing on the other issues, it really lends credibility to the issue of water. Because like you said, that's something we can fix. I think you can fix rather easily. There's some other things there that would be hard to get at fixing.
I agree. That's a good point.
I think also, playing off of what Herman said, is if you just focus on the water, you more or less would have did Lillian a disservice by not really telling her story, showing what is really the impact of her everyday life.
Interesting. Natalie?
I think that, well, a powerful aspect of her film is that I got a really keen understanding of the reconciliation aspect and the impact of Kony's actions and IDP. And at the end, though, I felt you had the line that the towns are being relocated or ravaged, or no, what's the word? Raised. That they're being raised, and so there's this. For me, I felt, I don't know where she's going to end up, and I'm concerned that she doesn't have the stability. But is someone donating for water? I'm going to donate for water, and the water is going to go where? Is it,
Yeah.
am I donating for water for the entire region, so that wherever she ends up, she has water? Or, like, that was where I felt a little lost
Yep.
as far as the water.
Good. I think that brings up a good point that we're going to get to in a slide in a minute, which is when we're out there identifying stories, trying to put a human face on things, it's a human being. So we're using that as a symbol for the broader story, but is that fair to that human being? Is it identifying, as you say, that person? Are you directly helping them or not? And is that a fair thing to do? So another complication to the mix, isn't it? So ultimately, we have to ask, who is our audience? And what story do we want to tell them? Did we achieve in getting this message across? And I think in this one we had mixed results. I think we definitely raised the complexity of the issue, allowed our donors to understand why we're trying to help. And I think in that way it was a success. And then, as I've mentioned, I think there's some failures as well. I wanted to talk a little bit about the role of storytelling in NGOs. Again, so we've already addressed the oversimplification of a complex issue. The danger there is that you're candy coating something that's very deep. The danger of not simplifying it enough is that you miss your audience. They don't know what to take away. So how do you balance that? Is the role of an NGO to do straight reportage, deliver facts, or are they supposed to have a point of view and be an advocate? At what point does your film start to border on the role of propaganda? Is that a bad thing? Is it a fundraising tool? Is the point of film merely to strike the kind of discussion they're having right now so that we can collectively decide on a solution? A woman named Carolyn Nordstrom wrote a book called A Different Kind of War. And one thing that she points up is that the telling of stories is in itself a healing act. And she quotes someone as saying that, "We're glad you finally came to ask us our story. Up until now, everyone has come to tell us what our story is." And that she felt these stories involve life and death characterizations, the need to dispel what is perceived as dangerous myth with personal truth. Again, our theme of truth is a powerful incentive for many people. So there is some benefit. There is some benefit in listening and bearing witness and sharing that. If for nothing else, Lillian had never told this story before. She now has it documented. We rolled the tape and she just talked for most of the day. She needed to get this story out. I don't know if you picked up that small element. It's a little confusing. She talked about a ritual that needed to be performed, and once that was performed, so it's a cultural thing.
I was going to say, I see a little bit of an analogy between the role of storytelling and her strongly, she said, I will be happy if I am able to go through these cleansing rituals
Yes.
and if my kids have education. So something very symbolic
Yes.
and something very practical in combination. And to me, what she
Well, it's an unseen complexity to this story. It's under the surface, it's psychological. It's the impact of war on human beings, and her need for catharsis. And the ritual she was talking about, I never quite understood. It involved sacrificing a goat and something about stepping on an egg, and she didn't have money to do any of those things. So she probably still does not, and probably still has not been able to perform those. But we were able to hear her story, and hopefully that was some small consolation for her. All right, so on the note of listening, thank you all for your attention, and I'd like to open up the floor now to any questions you may have, either in regards to Lillian's story in particular, or my approach to filmmaking, or things you're thinking about as you're going out into the field and trying to tell stories for the issues that are important to you.
Have you had any means of conversation, communication with Lillian to see where she's at now?
Yeah, so the question is if I've been in contact with Lillian, and the answer is no, she doesn't even have a cell phone, but my assistant in this film, his family owns the land that her IDP camp was on. So his mother and Lillian are friends, and they see each other once in a while. The latest update is that her husband did leave her. They did raise the camps. They did steal her land, and she's now living with her mother back in the north. Not an ideal situation, but at least she does have that. Thank you.
So with your focus as far as making the film, you had mentioned that you brought it back to your board. That it was a little fuzzy for me as to the exact outcome you were looking for the film. So I was wondering if you could speak a little more about that.
Sure. So the board really had no expectations other than let's try to generate awareness. And we did cut some different pieces. We had a 15-second regional spot. We had a couple of commercials, a couple of small things that were put out and well received and very simple. They're just about water, and those were effective.
I was just thinking about how we're doing some research on the new generation of digitally enabled NGOs.
Mm-hmm.
And so what people who study that for a lot longer than we've done it say is that those NGOs much more facilitate people who have been impacted by a social ill of some kind to tell the story directly.
Mm.
And to use that for both awareness raising, public education, advocacy, and fundraising. And that is something that brick and mortar NGOs, if you will, are not.
Hmm.
They're doing some of it, but they're not doing nearly enough as the Change.orgs and the Avasis of this world.
That's interesting.
And so I was wondering if what you're doing here is you could push that out more, probably.
Well, we're really seeing a convergence in media in general around storytelling these days. It's happening in advertising. It's happening. There's an increase in interest in everything from documentaries to reality TV. We love stories. We love this idea of verite, and I think we're going to see an increase in this. I think we're going to see more. I mean, the best case scenario is the donor gets to connect with somebody telling their own story the way that they want to tell it. Again, my goal with the film was to try to get out of the way and let Lillian tell her story. We had a lot of obstacles to that, including the complexities, including the language barrier. But yeah, I think that's powerful. I think there's power in that. Start here.
How was Lillian selected?
Good question. So my research assistant, like I said, his family owned the land where the IDP camps were. He's a young man. He was about 20 at the time, and he was just in the community, so he knew a lot of people. He gathered about 10 women, their names, and we went and visited each one of them. I had a list of criteria. I knew that I wanted somebody directly affected by war, someone that had a child who collected water, and I think that was pretty much it. Just an interest, someone that was interesting and open to it. And she just jumped off the page. Now, I mentioned the language barrier. We conducted the interviews And as I said, she just flowed. So she would talk for 5 minutes, and my research assistant would lean over and say, "They walked through the bush." I'm like, "What do you mean? That can't be all she said." We went back to our camp that night, and we transcribed this horrific story. I didn't know anything about Joseph Kony when I selected her. So imagine my surprise that she had been raped and impregnated by the leader, I mean, the Hitler of Uganda, basically. I was shocked. We were crying. I mean, we're transcribing this thing, stopping to cry and transcribe some more. Our translator, he was a mess. It's a horrific story. But so something I had on a slide earlier that I didn't really touch on is that everyone there has been touched by this war. So we could have picked anybody. So in that way, Lillian's very typical. She was atypical in the fact that she was abducted so directly with Joseph Kony. But most people in Northern Uganda, after 20 years, have either lost a father or a mother. They may have been a victim themselves. They may have been a child soldier. They most likely, 90%, lived in IDP camps. Think about that. So that's how we picked her.
Well, you took my question, but I'll ask another one. You mentioned that you have some things you'd like to change better, things that you said were weaknesses. So if you could do it over again, what would you change?
It'd be totally different. Start over. What would I change? I think I would. Maybe it needs to be longer to be able to address some of these issues. Maybe that's part of the problem. It was super limited funding. Basically everybody worked on this for free. But what would I do over? What would I do differently? One thing that Professor Mike Davis preaches on a lot is the idea of showing, not telling. And I think if we could have shown her struggle more, there's so much, because of the language barrier, like all the text, all the reading you have to do, I'd like to strip that out of there. It's too much work, it's too complex, it's too confusing. So somehow focusing this thing and still getting at all of this. So the answer is I don't totally know, but I'm pretty sure it would look drastically different. Jada?
What has been the Ugandan reaction to it?
It's really, the people that have seen it and commented to me have just been grateful. Hey, thank you for listening to our story. They aren't totally shocked by it. To them, it's such a part of their life and their culture that it's just like, yeah, okay, great, you saw this. You seem surprised by that.
I really enjoyed the film.
Mm-hmm.
I just get sometimes a little bit uncomfortable when we portray certain people in this kind of like position of despair, and we're sitting here just watching it and pretending to have feelings about it.
Yeah.
And so I don't know whether Ugandans how they feel. Do they actually appreciate that? Do they feel like they're being exploited?
Yeah.
What is their reaction?
Yeah, I mean, so far I have not gotten any of that kickback of, oh, that's just your imperialist worldview, we're fine. But it's something I am totally sensitive to. In fact, it's part of my research. There's two things, so to kind of combine both your questions. I think I would tell a less negative story next time. I think our media is oversaturated with stories that make us feel bad. So how could we engage you in this same story with a different twist? And I don't know the answer to that, but it's a question I'm wrestling with and want to find out. And yeah, it's a real danger, getting back to the idea of holding someone up as emblematic of anything, anywhere, is going to be fraught with some contentious sides, right? So I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Well, you took what I was going to say about painting a more positive light of Uganda, because all of Uganda can't be that negative. So when you if you do a more positive spin on it, then people would have a better image of the country. They wouldn't be so typecast as being so downtrodden
Totally.
and like that.
Yeah.
But to the charity, what was the interpretable thing? What was the means of getting water to people?
So he had, you guys probably couldn't hear that in the back, but he said two things. One is that basically, yeah, this film is portraying, for people that may not be informed, this is a downtrodden community, portraying them in a negative light. And is that fair? Basically, right? Am I summarizing? Yeah. And I agree. I mean, that's something that I think, it's not representative of all of Uganda. It's definitely not representative of all of Africa, but it surely is representative of this community. So it's a hard thing to balance. And the second question was, how does the water delivery happen? Right. Clearwater does a number of things. They do protected springs. They do repair of boreholes. They dig new wells. And starting to do water catchment as well. Yes?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, there's something I'm missing about portraying a downtrodden community in a negative light or in a positive light. Because personally, I don't understand how you can portray a downtrodden community in a positive light. Because if the community is downtrodden and the community is subject to some violence, whether it's structural or otherwise, and portraying the community on its own starts the conversation about the community. I mean, how individuals perceive the portrayal of the community is up to them. But it starts a conversation about the community that one can will go in a particular direction or in a good direction. So portraying the community, I think, should suffice as an objective, and how people interpret after should be there. Okay. That's one. Sorry. I was going to ask a question before Shada's question about the people in Uganda. So people in Kampala, people in Entebbe, are they aware? Do they care? I mean, are they not? I was going to add apathy to the list, but I was worried that I was going to be a bit too cynical. Yeah. I mean, from perspective of the people in Entebbe and in Kampala, are they aware of stories like this? Do they care? Do they want to know? Would they rather not know?
You nailed it. You nailed it. The people he's asking about Kampala, which is the capital of Uganda. It's about an 8-hour drive to the north, and they don't care. Most people there.
Why not? When you say that, do you mean they don't care about this particular community in Lillian, or do you mean they don't care about the issue of all the people who were impacted by the war, etc.?
Yeah, I'm being callous, but what I'm saying is the level of attention, like when you're in Kampala, people say, oh, why would you go to the north? Like, don't ever go there. We don't go there. We don't talk about the north. It basically doesn't exist. Stay here. We have nice food in Kampala. We can go to the lake. You know, we have nice malls. Why would you go up there?
It's what I'd expect. So
Yeah. Of course, Tosca, to your point, that's not everyone. There are people that are engaged and things like that. But
it is very interesting what this.
But the prevailing.
I'm familiar with this.
Yeah, the prevailing sentiment is kind of one of callous. But I love this conversation, guys. So I mean, I think these are the things that I wrestle with. You know, I don't have the answers. This is my first film, so maybe it failed. You know, maybe it was totally wrong, the wrong approach. And next time, you know, I'm going to take all this stuff into consideration. So I love this conversation, absolutely. And I think one thing, and I'll get to you, Bruce, is that telling a negative situation through maybe a character that's doing something positive. Maybe that's a way to approach it. Maybe our heroine is not a victim, but someone that's trying to do something, give you some hope that maybe there is something happening, because there's plenty of those people there. All right, Bruce.
So Jake, if I heard you earlier, you said you split the film up into smaller pieces, and I think you said that was effective. I'm curious, what does that mean
Good question. Metrics, of course, are always important. Let's see if I can pull it up. How do I get out of here? Question is, where is it? I don't think I have it right now. Sorry, Bruce. We did a 15-second spot that was shown all over the eastern region, New York, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, and we received donations from it. People that directly cited having seen the spot and going to the website and interacting with the NGO. So that was definitely one way. Having screened the film a number of times at human rights festivals, that engaged people at a different level as well, that hopefully then spread that interest around as well.
Hope the question is not too cynical. If the end aim is fundraising, yeah, for the certain project, what's your view on the competition in this field? Fundraising for NGOs. For example, you are showing this film, and there are 4 other guys who are showing stories about, Syria, Ukraine, and then we have to.
We don't have to go that wide. We can stay in Northern Uganda and talk about water for life, water for people, charity water. We can talk about invisible children, who put out the Kony 2012 campaign. I'm sure you've all heard of that. And let's talk about that for a second, because that was, I think, from a marketing standpoint, a huge success. It drove more traffic to YouTube, thank you, than I think any other video. 100 million in the first week or something like that. Totally crashed the system. Huge success. Their facts weren't quite right. A lot of people then attacked them because they got the story, people felt they got the story wrong, that they had this simplistic, imperialistic view of the situation, and they attacked them on it. So it was a success, but it was a mitigated success. And it got them a lot of money. It did get them a lot of money. But was that the right thing to do? It led to their founder having a nervous breakdown. But sorry, so your question is about competition, and yes, it's all there. I think for the nonprofit itself, it has ways that it stands out in that competition. As far as in the media sphere, we're getting killed. We don't have the money, we don't have the budget of charity water or anybody like that. So they crush us.
I mean, how they compete on the news, the scarier the picture, the more attention it gets. So is it fair, to do something like that for the good purpose like this?
Okay. So that's getting back to the propaganda question, right? Like, is being an alarmist okay if the outcome is good?
Or you could even invent something, which is not true, something more scary, and maybe get more attention for the good thing, and then to help the community. How fair it is.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's certainly an interesting ethical debate.
Because we had this thing in Ukraine.
Really?
Yeah, people who watch
making up.
Watch Russian TV and really, go fight in Ukraine to protect people in Ukraine who doesn't want to protect.
Wow, that's kind of scary.
I think we have time for one more question or final thoughts from Jake.
I have a question, just a quick question.
Yes.
Could or would any local, let's say Ugandan, specialists like you make this kind of documentary, or they would be scared to do that?
Say your question again.
Same kind of similar topic can be touched as in this kind of format by Ugandan?
By Ugandan.
Movie makers or like you?
Absolutely. I think that's a great approach too. Let them tackle it. Let them tackle it.
Because they can do it.
They,
I mean, they're not scared or all these effects. But
well, it's a couple of fold. One is giving them. Did everyone hear the question? Like, why not enable a local Ugandan to tell the story? And I think that's a great approach. One is they don't necessarily have the resources or the knowledge of filmmaking in itself. And part of it is that apathy too. Part of the people that do have the resources are in the South and don't so much care about this.
And there's a lot of NGOs who work with participatory video and so on that is not, this quality.
Yes.
And I would imagine that there's a lot of documentaries these days made in countries by people from the country compared to 10, 20 years ago.
Absolutely. And Clearwater, they have, they send their technicians out in the field with videos and they do smaller things. So yeah, I think that's a great way to tap into that. All right, last one.
From your point of view, did this film achieve its purposes for you?
For me?
Yeah. Yes or no? I just short answer.
Herman, put me on the spot.
I'm just curious.
No.
Okay.
I don't. I don't think so. I think it could have been done better.
We're our own worst critic, so.
Yeah. Yeah. The main thing for me is that it brought up the issues, that it started a dialogue. And that to me is the power of film, is to have these conversations, that we all go forward with something that we're going to fine tune the next time, right? So anyway, thank you for your attention. And look forward to the next one next week.
All right, thank you.